Have you sometimes thought, if only he had better coping skills, or if only I knew the right strategies to use with her? As a child psychologist specializing in ADHD, I hear this often. It makes sense because the best therapies for ADHD focus so much on skills and strategies. But when the focus is so narrow, the big picture and small nuances get lost. So after working with hundreds of families over the last decade, I've put together this list of 25 powerful lessons that I wish parents knew about ADHD. And they'll help you avoid common mistakes and make your ADHD parenting journey easier and more positive. Let's dive into the first lessons. Do you ever notice how the same behavior from your child can annoy you one day, but not the next? One day you feel frustrated at something they do, and the next, even though they're doing the exact same thing, it doesn't faze you. How does this happen? It's because even in the same situation, what you're thinking and saying to yourself can be different, which can lead to different reactions. This is why the first 6 lessons are part of one big idea you need to know. Your mindset matters a lot because how you think about ADHD and your child directly affects your reactions and feelings about them. This brings us to lesson number 1. Most parents I've worked with describe a frustrating cycle. Their child acts out, then later the child feels bad, but eventually repeats the exact same behavior again. To me, this can be a clue of ADHD. A child does something wrong or pretty extreme, feels remorseful or guilty after, but then they do the exact same behavior again the next day. Why? It's because of lesson number 1. ADHD behaviors are not intentional. Children with ADHD are not actively choosing to misbehave or be disruptive. They're not doing these things on purpose. Their brain is wired differently and has different needs. They feel bad when they've realized they've done something wrong, but their impulsivity and self-regulation make it hard to avoid reacting the exact same way the next time. And this relates to lesson number 2. So many parents who are struggling with their kids' ADHD come to me and say, he's just manipulating us because he wants his own way. And they're getting into these really negative cycles with their kid because of how their child reacts to directions and rules. But when a parent assumes that a child is being manipulative, emotions often turn negative very quickly, and there's very little room left to examine alternative explanations. While many behaviors may seem manipulative, lesson number 2 is to avoid making assumptions and judgments about your child's ADHD behavior. Continually remind yourself to be an outside observer of difficult situations and challenge yourself to come up with several alternative explanations for their behavior. You'll ultimately have better communication, cooperation, and creative solutions to the problem. Lesson number 3. To be able to come up with those alternative explanations and creative solutions, you've got to really know how ADHD impacts someone's daily life and what ADHD really means and looks like for your child. In the field of psychology, the information about ADHD continues to grow and change. It's not all that long ago that it was believed to only appear in boys, and only recently have we really begun to talk about how hard emotion regulation is when you have ADHD. You need to follow lesson number 3. Continually learn about ADHD and get curious about all the ways ADHD impacts your child. Lesson number 4. One of the most common misconceptions I see when parents are learning and looking for help for their child is that they ask for therapy for their child. What many parents don't know is that individual therapy for their child is not the best way to help them with their ADHD. All of the behavioral research on ADHD shows that teaching parents certain skills is what will really lead to the biggest changes in a child's behavior. Helping a child with ADHD is not just about teaching them skills. It's more about changing the parent's behavior and reactions with their child. So this mantra is lesson number 4. I make changes to help my child. When you use different skills, you will help your relationship and your child's behavior improve. And as a parent to a child with ADHD, you are really working hard to be a good parent to them, to give them what they need and help them grow up strong. It's a tough job. I've even heard people say kids with ADHD need superhero parents. And there's truth to that. Kids with ADHD need a lot from their parents, which takes time, energy, and resources. Which leads me to lesson number 5. It's okay to grieve what might have been, what you wished you knew earlier, and for the hard stuff you and your child experience. And remember to practice self-compassion. You are a rock star parent, and you're doing the best you can with the information and resources you have. And when you don't, practice forgiveness. But more on that a little later. Before we move on to the next big idea, there's one more lesson about how much your mindset matters. And while I think all of these lessons are important, this one is at the top for me. So often, we think about the things that are difficult when you have ADHD, like self-control and emotion regulation. And those things are truly hard. But remember that kids with ADHD have some really special strengths too. Strengths that can make them incredibly successful, like the many famous athletes and actors and musicians and entrepreneurs with ADHD. I think it's because people with ADHD are some of the most creative and high-energy people on the planet. And when you really harness these strengths, amazing things can happen. So stop comparing your child or your family to others, especially based on the things that are hard. Do what's best for you and your child, which leads me to lesson number 6, one of the most important lessons to learn. Value your child for who they are. They are wonderful, and you can make sure they grow up knowing that. But how do you actually help them know they're valuable? Before we dive into the biggest things you can do, if you find this video helpful or relatable, I hope you have the mindset to tap the like button and subscribe. This would make me feel wonderful and will help this video spread to more families who may need help. So how do you help kids know they're valuable? The next 4 lessons will introduce you to how to do this. And they're all part of this big idea that I wish everyone knew about ADHD. Be sure to prioritize the positive. Kids with ADHD tend to get more negative feedback than their peers because their behavior tends to be more noticeable and disruptive than other kids. However, when negative comments are the majority of feedback they get, what do you think that does to how they feel about themselves and how they view their world? Imagine if every time you showed your boss progress on a project, they reacted by complaining about it. You'd eventually start to question yourself and feel helpless. You keep trying, but you just keep getting told about what's wrong with your work. As the parent to a child with ADHD, you have the power to control the type of feedback you give your child. You have the ability to balance out the negative feedback they will inevitably get with positive things you notice and draw attention to. So, lesson number 7 is give positive feedback often and regularly. And this will set you up for success with lesson number 8. Think about a moment when you were trying to learn something new or truly challenging, like mastering a new skill at work or figuring out a complicated cake recipe. What motivated you to keep going when it got tough? Was it the fear of punishment or failing? Or was it the raise that your new skills might get you or the beautiful frosted cake on your kitchen counter? If you want kids with ADHD to change their behavior faster and in a way that sticks for the long term, use positive reinforcement rather than punishment. When something is difficult for them, provide an incentive or reward for doing it. Get them to do the thing you want with positive reinforcement rather than punish them for what you don't want. And this is lesson number 8. ADHD kids, and anyone really, learn better with positive reinforcement. And this relates to lesson number 9. It's important to be clear with instructions and expectations, which I'll tell you more about a little later. But make sure to phrase your instructions in a positive way that directly says what you want or expect. For example, keep your body to yourself instead of don't hit me, or stay near me in the parking lot instead of stop running ahead. Say exactly what you want them to do. It'll increase how likely they are to repeat your desired behavior and will significantly improve cooperation. You're making it really clear exactly what you want them to do. So lesson number 9 is tell kids what you want them to do instead of what not to do. And the last lesson that relates to this big idea of prioritizing the positive has to do with helping them recognize and grow their strengths and interests. There are many things that won't come naturally for kids with ADHD or that they don't enjoy because of certain challenges, and that's perfectly okay. Help them find the things that spark their interests and the places where they thrive. This will help them develop a positive sense of self. How do you do that? With lesson number 10, intentionally make room for and schedule time for their interests and strengths. For example, if your child loves to draw, set up a dedicated art space and schedule regular drawing time. And remember that these lessons are just an introduction. There's a lot more you should learn about ADHD, especially when it comes to the best ways to give positive feedback or effective directions and commands. There are several weeks of my 12-week ADHD Masterclass program that teach you exactly how to put these big ideas into practice so you can encourage better behavior, calm big emotions, and get kids to listen better. And when you're in the program, you'll get real-time feedback from me to really help you and your child learn and grow. Check out the links in the description to learn more. But lesson number 10 actually brings me to another big idea for helping kids with ADHD. And this one is my favorite. I think it's what is explicitly missing from a lot of the behavioral treatments for ADHD and what families with ADHD really benefit from prioritizing. And that's to put your relationships first. There's a reason why I say this in every one of my videos. Here's why this is so crucial. You may have heard about one of the longest studies on happiness, a Harvard study that began way back in 1938. The researchers found that it wasn't achievement, money, fame, IQ, genes, exercise, or diet that played the most significant role in long-term happiness. The study concluded that close relationships are actually the best predictor of long-term happiness and even longevity. And I think this is even more important for kids with ADHD. They need and deserve support from someone who really gets them and who values them for who they are, so they grow up knowing their worth and what they really need. So how do you build such a close relationship? Well, lesson number 11 is intentionally spend quality time together. Treat your relationship like the long-term investment it is. You need to regularly and consistently make deposits for it to grow and stay strong. So block out dedicated time for the relationship with your child. Now remember, close and strong doesn't always mean positive or perfect. You will make mistakes. Own up to it out loud when you do. Show them what it means to admit you made a mistake and respectfully own up to it, because they will make mistakes too. And your relationship with them is a great safe space for them to do that. Teach them what to do when they make a mistake by how you handled it, rather than forcing them to apologize. They'll learn a sincere apology from watching you, and learning how to apologize well will benefit all of their relationships so much more. So lesson number 12 is get good at repairing the relationship so your child will too. Speaking of being a model for your child and having them learn by watching you, it's important to keep in mind that kids first learn about relationships through the one they have with their parents. And relationships can sometimes be tricky for people with ADHD. Distractibility in conversation, forgetting important events, or being late to return emails and texts add a layer of complexity to relationships. People with ADHD aren't doing these things on purpose, but they still may affect how other people view them or their actions. Help them figure out accommodations for things that are more difficult socially through their relationship with you. This is why lesson number 13 is model healthy relationships through the one you have with them. And this brings us to the final lesson about this big idea of putting relationships first. The relationships you prioritize with others are important too, for both you and your child. Raising a child with ADHD can be so hard at times, and so many parents come to me saying, "What am I doing wrong? I don't see other parents struggling with this." Know that you are not the only one struggling, because I've heard so much about this from so many different parents over the last decade. But it's one thing for me to tell you that you're not alone, and another for you to experience it firsthand. So lesson number 14 is really important for ADHD parents. Have relationships with other ADHD parents. It will not only help you feel less alone, but also give you hope, ideas, and motivation from other parents who've been there and really get it. And if this idea of relationships first resonates with you, I encourage you to join my 12-week ADHD program. You'll not only learn effective parenting strategies, but you'll also connect with other parents who truly get it. We have weekly live Q&As where you can talk with me and other parents in the program, and structured daily tasks to help you parent your child with ADHD better while keeping your relationship a top priority. One thing to help your child feel like you really get it is with consistency and structure, which is the next big idea behind the next 5 lessons. Consistency and structure can make a huge difference. They can have a big impact on solving problems and minimizing challenges in a way that makes it easier for kids with ADHD. But keeping up with structures and routine is hard. Evaluating changing needs and behaviors is hard. Parenting a child with ADHD is hard. Don't equate hard with wrong. Remember this important lesson, number 15. Just because something's hard doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. Embrace the challenges, knowing that they lead to growth. And some strategies just need consistency. The first thing ADHD parents need to be consistent with is how to handle tough behaviors. You need to give clear directions and follow through. You need a plan for exactly what happens when a boundary is broken. You need to consistently give kids feedback. And your plan needs to include positive reinforcement. This is why lesson number 16 is you need a clear, consistent, predetermined system for dealing with behavior. This is closely tied to lesson number 17. You need space to reflect on what's going well and what's not. You need time to evaluate how your structure and the things you're trying to be consistent with are working. You need time to create and tweak your plan for success. Schedule regular time for reflection, just like you would any non-negotiable appointment. Otherwise, you'll be making things up as you go without creating helpful and meaningful structure. Speaking of non-negotiables, think back to when your child was first born, that survival state you were in for the first few months. Sleep was hard to come by, and you probably didn't feel much like exercising or preparing nutritious meals. But I bet as soon as your baby was sleeping more, so were you, and you started to get more motivation to get back into your regular habits. This is probably one of the more extreme examples, but with a lack of sleep, other things start to get harder too. And sleep, exercise, and good nutrition are like the pillars our mental health stands on. When you can prioritize getting enough sleep, exercise, and nutrition, you give yourself a solid foundation for feeling better. And this is lesson number 18. Consistent sleep, exercise, and nutrition need to be part of your daily structure and habits for both parents and kids to improve mental health. And the final lesson under the big idea of consistency is key. Lesson number 19, stick with what works. When you've found something that helps you or your child maintain a routine or structure, just keep doing it. Things that are predictable help us feel safe, take less mental energy, and make it easier to regulate emotions. So if it's working for you and your child, keep at it. The final 6 lessons all capture one mistake I see many parents make. When their kids' emotions are so big and they just can't get calm, many parents think, I need to help my child calm down. But here's the big idea. Calm is not the goal. People with ADHD have trouble with self-regulation and self-control, which includes emotions. The goal is not to be more calm. The goal is to effectively regulate your emotions, to be able to get out of that constant feeling of dysregulation and come back to your own optimal zone of emotional tolerance. Okay, that's a lot of psychology speak, but the point is, people with ADHD are not naturally what many people would consider calm. They need movement and thrive on energy. So don't force calm. Instead, learn how to respond more effectively to overwhelm and stress in a way that works for an ADHD brain. How do you respond to overwhelm and stress in a way that works for an ADHD brain? Well, one way is with lesson number 20. One of the things that can be difficult and distracting for an ADHD brain is when things are complicated and cluttered. This could be visually, like countertops or the bedroom floor. It could also be a schedule that jumps from one activity or commitment to the next. Or it could be the process of getting ready for school or bed. So when things feel too overwhelming, too big, or too complicated, they probably are. This is why lesson number 20 is simplify. Keep tasks and environments manageable by having less there in the first place. Break down large projects into smaller tasks. Simplifying also applies to how you parent during moments of intense emotions. Imagine that when your child gets upset or is having a meltdown, a feeling starts to flood their brain. And that flood grows quicker and stronger as emotions intensify. And soon that emotional flood has just taken up all the space in their brain and they're stuck, drowning in that emotional moment. If this were actually happening in real life, you'd jump in and rescue your child or throw them a raft and get them to safety before you did or said anything else. There probably would be very little talking aside from, here, hang on, because all anyone can think about is surviving and getting to safety. It's the same with emotions. When they've taken over, the body is in survival mode. No amount of reasoning or logic or teaching is going to change that emotion in the moment. So learn to hit the pause button with your words. Throw them a metaphorical life raft just by noticing the emotional situation and telling them you're there. This is lesson number 21. During emotional moments, fewer words are better. Save the teaching and logical problem solving for when the emotional flood subsides. And this is what lesson number 25 will tell you about in a few minutes. But how exactly do you throw them that metaphorical life raft? You do that with your understanding and telling them that what they're feeling makes sense given the situation. When someone feels less alone and that someone else gets it, it helps turn down the volume on those intense feelings. A simple, gentle expression and an I'm here for you can work too. These are all examples of lesson number 22, validate first. Before you say or do anything in an intense emotional moment, pause, and with your words, presence, and your body language, tell your child you see them. If you'd like to explore this further, my ADHD program offers 4 whole weeks of daily practice around calming big emotions. There's another thing that's really important for better emotion regulation. One of the leading experts on ADHD, Dr. John Rady, recommends giving kids a brain break every hour. It's basically a rest for your brain and movement for your body. An ADHD brain needs physical movement to thrive. Movement increases dopamine, which is not only thought to be lacking in ADHD brains, but also helps improve learning, focus, and attention. So lesson number 23 is include more movement. This actually reminds me of another part of emotion regulation that's often overlooked by ADHD parents. Many people with ADHD and neurodivergence have sensory differences where their sensory systems become easily overloaded or are not receiving enough sensory input. When this happens, it leads to feelings of overwhelm and can cause emotional meltdowns. Focusing on soothing the senses can provide comfort and reduce the intense feelings. Sometimes it takes a bit of trial and error to figure out what feels best. But that's lesson number 24. Don't downplay the impact of the senses. So you've simplified, noticed, and validated, but when do you do the teaching then? How do you help kids with ADHD learn from their mistakes? Start by making your home a safe place where they can make mistakes without guilt or shame. Mistakes are a way to learn and build problem solving and coping skills. When something doesn't work, kids with ADHD need a positive environment that encourages them to discover what does work. And sometimes they'll need your support and ideas to figure out what they need. Mistakes are not inherently bad. They help us grow and change. So lesson number 25 isn't just about letting kids learn from their mistakes. It's also about you remembering what it feels like to make mistakes and extending that same grace and patience to your children that you hope others would extend to you. Because as parents, we stumble too. We say the wrong thing, we react impulsively, we wish we could take back a moment. And just like we need to approach ourselves with kindness and focus on growth, our kids need the same understanding from us. Their mistakes aren't acts of defiance, they're data points on their learning journey. And sometimes the biggest lesson they learn is that even when they mess up, your love and support remain constant. Because you're not just teaching them, you're growing alongside them. And that's a powerful thing. And remember, these 25 lessons are just an introduction to these powerful ideas. Watch this video next for a deeper look at the most essential ideas parents of kids with ADHD must know, and how you can actually put them into practice to calm big emotions, encourage better behavior, and help your child thrive. Remember, put your relationships first. I'll see you in the next video.